This is a reading of my Medium article, Reading and Pondering, I'm Not an Artist by Giovanni Aloi, Chapter 3. You can find the link in the comments and about section of this video if you want to follow along. There are some heavy themes discussed here, including the Underground Railroad and the impact of slavery in America. Let's begin. Art should be for everyone, and should give humans the tools to alter their realities. Yet, the artist myth has led generations of artists astray. To get back to a meaningful creative practice, the identity of an artist can be shed in favor of a more holistic approach. By the mid-1900s, the rebellion of modern art had become folded into the mainstream art world. As Giovanni Aloi states in Chapter 3 of his book, I'm Not an Artist, quote, the romantic myth of the artist as misunderstood genius had at this point become a far too real, self-fulfilling prophecy, unquote. Aloi 57. The art world thrives on a scarcity mindset. By creating chains of supply and demand, and by valuing the dollar sign over any other symbolism within art, there is a tendency to set aside innovation for what will sell. Quote, for all the rebelliousness and desire not to conform, modern artists were still, like their predecessors, producers of the most exclusive kind of luxury goods. It is essential to come to terms with this idea, not to justify the commercialization of art, but to understand that what hangs in museums and what we will revere as the greatest 20th century art essentially is an exclusive commodity designed for the 1%. Unquote, Aloi 69-70. Where fine art has always been a commodity, craft is part of a sharing economy. Everyone has access to craft, even if they don't have access to art supply stores. Craft can be composed of any material. As a teenager in high school art class, we learned about recycling magazines to make beads. I had an obsessive few months of rolling these beads, and friends would bring me their old magazines, knowing I was running out of my own stash of old magazines at an alarming rate. Here's one of the coasters I made out of recycled magazines, and still use 15 years later. Unlike fine art, craft is made for a purpose, or made to be given to a person. Its functionality and accessibility makes it available to people. There are also radical possibilities within craft that the fine art world limits. For example, the quilting practices used by enslaved people in America. Quote, Raymond G. Dubard, a professor of art history at Howard University, contends that in the days of slavery, quilting had a role far greater than the pursuit of art. In his book Hidden in Plain View, A Secret Story of Quilts and the Underground Railroad, Professor Dubard advances the thesis that secret codes were incorporated into quilts that were used by slaves to help them find their way to freedom along the Underground Railroad, unquote. By hiding messages in quilts, which the white men oppressing them would see simply as an innocuous decoration, Africans were able to escape to freedom. These secret signs and symbols embedded in quilts are just one of many examples of times that craft has been used to subvert dominant narratives. Quilts more recently have been used to process the generational trauma that resulted from the legacy of slavery. In the 2025 exhibit Soft Power at UNC, there is a quilt on display by artist Karen Hampton titled Little Dreams. Presented on this gravestone-like tapestry is an embroidered poem by Georgia Douglas Johnson about the hopes that could not be realized by enslaved people in early America. The poem begins, quote, I'm folding up my little dreams, unquote. And this line alone captures the feeling that was likely felt by multitudes of people who had hopes and dreams they could not pursue while forced to toil for the sake of another man's profit. Both the original poet and Karen Hampton, while born in a later time, clearly felt the severity of this situation almost 100 years later. It is painful to think back on the torture these souls went through, and even if art could have transformed their lives, the men who enslaved them would not have allowed that transformation. Even now, almost 200 years after slavery has ended, we can still see the impact that these crushed dreams have had. What would our world look like now if millions of people had been allowed to follow their dreams instead of being forced into slavery?